All right. Hello, Nicole. It's good
Hi,
to see you
David.
here.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, this should be a fun and really interesting discussion. Um, I used to think fraud was boring. Now I don't anymore. Hi, I'm David Safir. I do cash flow clinics like this on YouTube. So you can see my YouTube channel for other clinics. But today I'm really excited because I have Nicole Landau, and she is a specialist in fraud with small businesses. So Nicole, can you tell us a little bit how you got started getting involved with fraud?
I am the geek that likes fraud, right? Likes sifting through it. So my name is Nicole Landau. I am the president of Landau Consulting Solutions. And one of the service offerings we have is fraud investigations. So I'm a certified fraud examiner. I didn't really intentionally to go set out to be a fraud examiner, but I had a boss who had his certification and said, I think you would love this. At that point in my career, I was an internal auditor. And so
Oh,
he said, you should go study for this exam. You'll learn a lot. It can bring a lot into your internal audit engagements. So when I was in public accounting, I actually had a client that had two cases of fraud. And
same client.
so same client. And so my team called me in. They said, you have your CFE, go down, work with this client. The FBI was involved in the OCC because it was a banking client. So
Oh.
I worked with both the regulators and the FBI on those two cases, and it went to full prosecution, and I absolutely fell in love with the work.
All right. So what really made me go, what's going on here is you posted on LinkedIn, you wrote about when there's economic problems, and right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, is when fraud can really escalate. Why is that?
So if you think about the current environment, you think about people that are at home, the financial situation is different. There might be furloughs, they might be laid off, or there's uncertainty in their company. So let's think about a person that might have access to cash or accounts receivable or payroll. They're in those positions and they're not sure if their company is going to survive. But on the home front, they might have some financial troubles and they're just put into a spot. They're great people, but bad things happen and they do bad things too. So now they need to provide for family members who might be affected by it, who are laid off. So
Okay.
now they need to find money.
So what I'm hearing, the first thing I heard you say was there's opportunity. And so there's opportunity. You said these are people in position of responsibility to dealing with accounts payable, human resources, etc.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's opportunity. Yep.
And then there's the second one. You said there is a need.
So there might be a pressure. Let's say an
Pressure.
at-home pressure, a
Okay.
financial pressure to provide for their family.
So this is not just simple greed.
Right. So when fraud happens, there's a fraud triangle. So we talked about pressures, we talked about opportunity, and then last part of that triangle is rationalization. So
Oh,
now they're rationalizing why it's okay that they're stealing from their company.
so what would some of those rationalizations be? I can guess, but you're the expert.
So think about like if a company owner is putting personal expenses through the company. And so they are paying the bills and they're saying, you know what, or maybe they're profiting right now through the coronavirus and somebody doesn't agree that we should be profiting off of it. We're taking advantage of other people, or there's something that's going on that they say, you know what, I should be able to take my share too. And so
Okay,
now
so
they're rationalizing it.
so it's not so much the owner who's stealing from himself or herself. It's the employee who watches these personal expenses go out the back door and says, yeah, I'd like some of my personal expenses paid for also because I'm in trouble, or my neighbors are in trouble, or my parents, whoever it is. You've got that pressure. You've got the opportunity. Now they start rationalizing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So what are some of the signs? I mean, when you get a call, is there a commonality, or are there a few key signs that people recognize? They say, something's going on, not quite right.
So there's behavioral red flags is what we call them in the fraud world. One of those things might be just, they call it a parking lot audit. So go out and take a look at maybe your employees are showing up during these times. Maybe they show up with a new car. Maybe they're living beyond their means and something just doesn't make sense. They're spending more than what you're paying them. So are they living beyond their means? Or do they come across some money and they have a story that goes with it? So they call them like a parking lot audit, because you go out and you walk the parking lot and see that this person's only making $20,000 a year, but they're driving a $75,000 car. Does that make sense?
Or even a $20,000 new car and a $20,000 a year salary doesn't make sense.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be huge extravagances. It could just be sort of normal but expensive for that pay scale.
Yes, exactly. So that could be one flag.
New clothing, expensive clothing.
Yes.
Hearing about, well, now you can't go out to dinner, you can't go to concerts, you can't take trips. So anything else from today's environment, when you can't go out other than a car that you mentioned, you can't even buy clothing. I guess you could online. So what other parking lot type things, is there anything else?
So let's say in the current environment, everybody's working from home and you're calling your bookkeeper and you're saying, hey, I need these reports. I'm trying to do a spot check on where we are. I'm trying to do some cash flow forecasting to see where we're at in the next few weeks. And they're very protective. They don't come up with reports, or they have an excuse, and you start to look at your numbers and it just doesn't add up. Something isn't quite right.
Okay, so this is that going to the next level of the gut check analysis of your numbers.
Yes.
Okay. And then if somebody starts suspecting fraud, are there things that I'm going to start with that they should not do? Because I've been involved with some stuff, not me personally committing fraud, but identifying some things, and there's certain things that auditors say, do not do this.
So definitely don't approach the person, right? Don't say, hey, David, I think you're stealing from me. Because what they can do is, you want to make sure you have all of your systems secure and all of your records secure, because the one thing you don't want them to do is to go in and wipe everything clean. And then you have no audit trail, you have no documentation. That would be a nightmare, and I have seen that happen.
Well, and in my mind, that would be the least of your problems. If they wipe out your accounting system, they basically wiped out your business.
Right.
But forget whatever fraud was there. It's the receivables and all the other things, payables. Okay, so don't talk to them.
Don't raise the flag. Don't approach them by yourself.
Right.
Bring
Okay.
somebody in, an expert that does this all the time, to do a review and help you go through and see what's going on, or at least get a backup of your company file.
Okay, so you'd be an expert for small companies up to a certain size of revenue, or how does that work?
So we can do public corporations as well. I've worked with companies like the banking client that I talked about that had 2 separate cases.
Okay.
So we can handle any size of any type of fraud.
Okay. So they can call you.
Yes.
They might have a friend or associate or their CPA, but warning, not all CPAs or financial experts are created equal. They might not know how to deal with it, and they could do the very things that you're not supposed to do because they're just not aware. Correct?
Absolutely, yes. Because
Okay.
the other thing, if it goes to court, there are things that can be dismissed in court. So you want to make sure you have everything tied down, so your case, if it does go to court, that it doesn't get thrown out. So there's certain procedures you have to follow in the event that it goes all the way to prosecution.
All right, but Nicole, I've worked with somebody, and this is the situation where I've had to be coaching people, and they go, yeah, but we just want to talk to see the person because it's probably not happening, right? That person's been with me for 20 years, or they're my best friend, so I'm just going to chat with them first, and probably it's nothing. Good idea? Bad idea? No.
Bad idea. I've seen that too many times. And then I also see business owners who have had the person for 30 years in their company. It happens once, and then they keep the person on, and it continues to grow. It doesn't go away. Just because you're going to talk to somebody doesn't mean they're going to find another way to do it. Obviously, there's already gaps in your processes and in your company. They'll just find another loophole.
So now you just mentioned what I would call escalation. My understanding is that it's a common pattern with fraud.
Yes. Yep.
Which the one time I was involved at a company I was at that there was some pretty significant fraud. It looked like this. It was small, small, small. And all of a sudden it looked like the coronavirus that it just went off shooting into the atmosphere.
Yes.
Is that common or?
Somebody got greedy. They got away with it and they just said, you know what? Nobody's looking. We're just going to keep going.
Okay. And so, all right, we've talked about that. I've got, make sure I want to cover all the questions I had for you. Okay. Basic steps to prevent fraud. Is it too late for a company to prevent fraud right now?
No, it's never too late. You can always implement new processes, but it starts at the top with the company owners, setting the tone at the top saying, fraud's not allowed here, and this is the measures we're going to take to start implementing it today. So it's really setting the groundwork and saying, we're going to have some fraud prevention measures. You might get some pushback from people if it's already happening. You might get more resilience. So that's another red flag. If it's already happening and you start to implement this, are you already getting pushback from the very beginning?
So so it's sort of almost like a contradiction. Is there a risk if you announce we're implementing that those people who are committing fraud are going to do the very activities that you said something about when you go and say, hey, Joe, are you committing fraud? They're not being told that, but they're hearing this message in the background.
So I think it's really just starting fresh. Like, you know, with this coronavirus, everybody's downtime. Let's refresh our policies. And one of these policies we need to refresh is fraud prevention measures. And this is what we're going to do.
So it's in a list of 4, 5, 10 other policies, and it maybe is buried towards the bottom because people assume the important ones are at the top.
Yes.
And don't put it at the bottom because people read the top and the bottom. So put it, you know, okay. So it's sort of like not this, we're doing fraud prevention now. It's more like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff. Okay.
I think that's a good way to introduce it right now. If you're going to start it right now, use the excuse, hey, I was listening to David's webinar and you know, this policy's always been on my list. And so let's talk about it and let's be open about it and get it implemented. So
would it be helpful from a proactive standpoint, especially right now, people having something come out from the company of saying, we understand there's financial pressures, we understand that you're nervous. If you have issues that you need help with, come talk to us.
Yep.
And not every company will be in the position to do payroll advances, or I don't know what is available.
Right.
But could that possibly do some fraud prevention for those people on the edge?
I think so. I think, you know, you have empathy for your employees. You help them set up a problem. They have a problem. Let's set up some measures to help with that. You know, even it might be a cash flow for them personally. Let's say that their cash flow in their home is down. Let's get some budgeting set up and how can they help their current situation?
You know, it's interesting you said that because I just took my personal cash flow model for my home, very much simplified it, and it's now available. If somebody happens to be listening, I haven't made this public yet, I'd be glad to share that. It's meant to be just shared for just that situation, for personal cash flow. That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. Okay, any other basic steps to prevent fraud? I know there's at least 1 or 2 that you and I have talked about.
So starting it from the top, but then also take a look at your processes. Do you have one person that's controlling everything? Do you need to have a second set of eyes? That's where a lot of companies get in trouble. They feel like they can't afford multiple people and multiple sets of reviews. So now might be the time to think about your company setup in your accounting function. If you only have one person, do we need to hire an outside person to do a review, an additional review to make sure nothing's going on and there's checks and balances in the process?
Okay. So, you know, I've got my bank account. I can enable it so other people can create checks, and then it's an automatic online cash workflow. So I have to approve the checks.
Yep.
And I'm going, oh, well, that would make sense. But I think there's holes in that. If you just, if I'm not really familiar with the transactions, there's probably holes in just saying, okay, I know who's getting paid. That's how much, go. it's deeper than that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So can you explain that a little?
So it's also when you're doing the AP, doing the review, and we're seeing this too. So our firm, we work with construction companies. So we have subcontractors that are sending invoices, and we're really telling our clients, make sure you're reviewing all of those invoices right now is really critical, because are they trying to put in extra expenses in there to fund their company that we're not responsible for or we don't need to pay? So take a look at each of your invoices that come in. And I know it seems like it's too much review, but somebody needs to be doing a second review on each invoice that's coming in. Is it a legitimate invoice? Is it a vendor that we do business with? Does it tie out with everything we have in our system? So we're telling everybody, do an extra review, an extra step right now.
So let's talk about some examples. Not everybody's in construction, but a lot of companies have key people who do purchasing. And let's make it clear, they shouldn't be the same people who are paying the bills.
Right,
right?
exactly. Yep.
So you've got somebody paying the bills, you've got people in purchasing. So one way is possibly to have the people doing the purchasing on any given item review the invoice, review checks, and do a sign off.
Right.
Is that an example?
Yep. So they should be reviewing the invoices because they know what the contract is and what they originally set up in the purchasing cycle, in the supply chain cycle.
And what the volumes are, and if they're a legitimate service provider, etc.
Yes. And then that should go to accounting to do a review for AP.
All right. Now, what about the solopreneur who's got a bookkeeper? Are there potential issues there?
Absolutely. Yes. If you have one person, there's a lot of opportunity if you only have one person that's doing it. So as the owner, you need to be reviewing. And one other thing we're telling clients right now is we always tell them, send the bank statement home to your house because it can be easily manipulated if it goes to the office, and I can take that bank statement and I can match it up to the accounting records, no problem. But if you have your bank statement sent to your home, you can review the checks that are going out. Are they vendors that you know? Are they vendors you're using? Does it make sense? But we're also telling clients right now, it might be too late if you're waiting on a monthly basis because cash is tight right now. So we need to monitor cash out the door. So take a look at your online banking and actually open each check. So even if you do it on a weekly basis, open each check image and do it there instead of waiting to get the bank statement at home on a monthly basis.
Okay. Is there any more security using ACH or other electronic payment methods instead of hard copy checks?
There is, but that can still be manipulated too. For our clients, we use bill.com, BILL.com, and there's an audit trail in there. So approvals can happen in the system, but everything is through the system. So you can get a complete audit trail of who changes what, when it's sent out, when it's scheduled. So if you're a solopreneur and there's one person, one bookkeeper, you might think about additional systems to help you with the review process and the audit trail a little bit more.
So you could go through once a week, maybe twice a week, and whatever's queued up in a system like bill.com, you can review each one. It's fast, it's easy. But again, the key there is understanding really what is it paying for, who's it paying, but at least it simplifies the mechanisms for doing so.
Yep, because you can also attach the invoices in bill.com. So you can review the invoices in the system and approve for payment.
Okay. Nicole, we're coming up on 20 minutes. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to make sure everybody understands or knows?
So fraud doesn't have to be a scary thing. I think you start today, you start having the conversations with your team of, this is a priority for me, cash is tight, let's implement new processes and do checks and balances. But also be aware, a lot of business owners don't want to talk about fraud, but it's a reality. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, they put out studies every single year. Companies are losing on average 5% of their revenues. So if you think about the smaller companies, that's a big number that's walking out the door.
Well, I always like to translate revenue into profit, because that 5% of revenue, there's no margin involved here. It's a pure expense. So
Mhm.
you're basically ripping 5% of your revenue, which could be half your profit. It could be a third of your profit. It could be
Right.
90% of your profit. And you're going, why am I not profitable? And that could be a huge reason why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So don't turn a blind eye. Be aware of it. Know that it's probably happening, and don't be afraid to implement processes now.
Okay, that's great. Nicole, if people want to contact you, how can they do that?
Best way is email Nicole, Nicole, at Landau, Landau, consultingsolutions.com.
Okay, and we're going to have show notes for those of you who are watching this recorded. It will be in the notes. And if you want to get a hold of me, if you are with me on LinkedIn, great. If not, go to David Safeer. That's David, Safeer. That's my LinkedIn profile. And then if you want to talk with me or get in touch with me directly, I'm at david@davidsafeer.com, which is david@david.safeer.com. Nicole, thank you. This is super informative. I learned something new every time I talk with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Stay home, and stay safe.